Um, so thank you guys all for coming. As we're looking through the chat, I'm very excited about the group we have. We have some pretty people from Montana, Ohio, California. I think there's an Arkansas on this box. So I'm very excited about that. So one of the things that we're doing is, as I'm excited about this, is a New York State Livestock Summit. My name is Brian Alkema. I'm the New York State 4-H Livestock and Companion Animal Specialist here in New York State. Some of you I may know. I've only been in this position for about 8 months, so this is my first adventure doing it this way, so bear with me. So what we're doing is this week we have Eileen Jensen that will be here doing advocating, and then we have next week we have Champion Choice Camps will be here talking about preparing before the barn, right? Doing stuff before the barn. The way this is going to work, Eileen is going to present for 45 minutes to an hour. If we have questions, we'll have questions, answer questions at that. And then I do have a Kahoot for those that want to stick around, and we'll just play a quick fun game of Kahoot if you haven't done that. When we'll share that. And one of the things with a Kahoot is it's easiest if you have a phone to do that with. And I will share that when we get closer. So the one thing I am asking is if you do have a question is to put it into the waiting or into the chat. We do have over 50 participants at this point, and I know with the groups that we have, we're well over 100 kids that are participating tonight. Once this is done, like I said, I am recording. This will be put up on the YouTube page, and we will share the link to cross so that if you missed a part, you can then jump on the YouTube and watch it again or pull out little parts of it. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So I am very excited to introduce a longtime friend of mine, Eileen Jensen. Eileen's got a different story and has a pretty cool path to where she is today and how she got to where she is today. Eileen is the executive director of the New York Animal Agricultural Coalition here in New York. And I'm going to turn it over to Eileen.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. And I will echo what Brian said. If you guys have questions throughout tonight, feel free to put them in the chat. I do have some questions throughout that I would love some participation on too, to put your ideas and thoughts and feedback into the chat as well. I have it open on my screen so I can try to keep up with that. But as Brian said, my name is Eileen Jensen. I am born and raised a farm girl here in New York State. I was born on a dairy farm, and I'm excited to be here to share a little bit of my story and how I'm an advocate and how you guys can all be advocates as livestock owners, as farm owners, as business owners, and just anyone interested in the animal agriculture industry. So we'll get started with just a little bit of a highlight of who I work for. So for the past 8 years, I've worked for this nonprofit called the New York Animal Agriculture Coalition, also known as NIAC, here in New York. And our mission as a nonprofit is to help people understand and appreciate animal agriculture. And we do that by fostering a dialogue. We want communication to happen between farmers or people that understand agriculture and the public. And so what we do is we empower farmers, we engage with the public, and we kind of bridge that gap, and we try to be proactive in what we do as an advocate. So I want to share a little bit of my story to help you start to think about what is your story. Because at the end of the day, the end of the night, the end of this hour, it's really all about what's your story? Why are you an advocate? Why do you do what you do? Why are you a farmer? Why do you promote agriculture? And you have to really think about, how did you get to where you are, or how are you building that path of yours? So my story began as that little girl on the left-hand side of the presentation here. As a lover of pigs, I grew up on a dairy farm alongside my 2 sisters and my mom and my dad. And honestly, I wanted nothing to do with agriculture when I first started thinking about my future and college education, what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an ESPN sports broadcaster. And so that's what I started in my college education was journalism and sports broadcasting. I quickly learned that agriculture is part of my life. It runs in my blood, and I really couldn't get too far away from it. And so I have an education in agricultural business and ag education. And so my path has really been unique. I have been an agriculture teacher in high school. I have worked in St. Louis, Missouri, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I've worked for big name companies like the United Soybean Board, Case IH Equipment. I've traveled the country for an entire year teaching others about agriculture. What landed me here in New York almost a decade ago was the fact that I get to work for farmers that helps me get to where I am. Those farmers were part of my path and part of my story. And it's an honor to get to work for them and work alongside them here in New York State. So what I want you to kind of start to think about are what are those pivotal points as you work through your journey and what's your story? So my first question for all of you, we're talking about advocacy. So I want you guys to drop some thoughts into the chat about what is advocacy? What does it mean to be an advocate? What are those things you think you're an advocate? These are questions that that you need to start thinking about as you're growing up in the livestock world, growing up in the barn, growing up at the county fair, and what does advocacy mean to you? What does that exactly mean? So as I'm going to kind of keep moving forward, but I want you to put some things in the chat of what is an advocate? Do you think you are an advocate, and how are you an advocate? The bottom line is we need more people telling the story of agriculture. We need more people like all of you, the nearly over the 50 people on this call. We need more people talking about the positive things of agriculture. Somebody wrote that advocacy is a promoter. You're exactly right. We're promoting the positive side of the industry. We're telling people about our farm. We're supporting it. So even if you don't live directly on a farm, you're telling the story. You're positively promoting the industry that you love. The reason we have to be an advocate, the reason we have to promote our story, the reason we have to talk about it is because times have changed. So we are no longer milking cows by hand in the backyard. We are no longer driving the same tractors that great grandpa drove. The other thing that's changed is there's not as many people living on the farm, growing the food directly on the farm as there was in generations before us. Today, we are more progressive. We are using technology galore on our farm, and that's okay. We just have to talk about it more. And one of the reasons we have to talk about it is because not everyone grew up on a farm. More and more generations, we are more generations removed. So people just have questions. People want to understand where their food comes from. They want to understand what they're seeing as they're driving down the road. So some other answers I see coming through, someone who represents agriculture, you're educating people. Maxwell and Owen, awesome. You have a YouTube channel and make videos. So those are examples we're going to talk about here is how can you be an advocate? And so that's a perfect way. So as you guys are talking about why you're an advocate and thinking about how to be an advocate, it's really a privilege to operate a livestock farm today. It's a privilege and it's a responsibility to be born and raised in agriculture, to work in agriculture, because you are 1% of the population that's responsible for feeding 100% of us. So what are the challenges that we're up against? So kind of next question in the chat is, we're all advocates. We all have a story to tell, but there's challenges that we have to talk about. And those are challenges that you have open and honest conversations about as advocates. So again, it's a privilege to operate a farm. It's a privilege to work in agriculture, and it's our responsibility to be those promoters. It's our responsibility to be that positive light and that positive face that people see. So there's a lot of misinformation. It's expensive, right? Those are some of the challenges that we are up against, but we have to talk about them because, like Holly said, misinformation, you can Google anything, but Google has no idea how to milk a cow. Google has no idea how to show goats. Google has no idea how to shear sheep. You guys are the ones that are the experts. People don't know about agriculture. They're used to living with their phone or living with technology at their fingertips. So the game plan today is I want to talk about who we're up against. Again, in order to figure out our story, we have to figure out and learn about the opponent. Who are we up against? Why do we have to tell our story? And then we're going to talk about ways to be proactive, be on that offense. And then we're going to I've got some ideas of how to run some drills at the end. And I'm going to share some information with Brian to share with all of you guys of how do you develop some ideas and your story as we work through all of this. So activists, you guys have talked about some of the challenges here. So some of the challenges that agriculture faces, people just getting told things, finances, mental health, these are all challenges we're up against. So what are things that activists go after us for? As people in agriculture, there's that other side of society that are completely against us and want nothing to do with agriculture. So what are some of their issues? The animal well-being that Rhonda just said, that is the number one thing that activists go after, right? Is how we treat our animals and how animals are cared for and how animals are housed on our farms. Some other issues that you might hear. So again, these are things that the people that don't understand agriculture, don't understand animals, are coming after us, lovers of agriculture. There's some other great ones. Housing, homegrown products, why we separate calves and cows. That's the number one question in the dairy industry is, why do we do that? So activists, their issues are antibiotics, branding, transportation, how we house our animals, food safety, in the dairy industry, docking tails, the use of equipment and technology, again, because we're not milking cows in our backyard one by one anymore, it doesn't mean that we don't care for them. It doesn't mean if you have 100 animals or 5,000 animals, we still care for them the same. We're just being more efficient. So this is kind of what we're up against. And sometimes it might feel overwhelming. It might feel like we are, up against something that we can't handle. But when you think about your story, what you do on your farm, and that's your focus, you don't have to think big, huge picture. Narrow it down into what do you know and what do you do on your farm? As we talked about misinformation, there is so many headlines out there that are negative, right? That are it might be one bad apple, it might have been an accident, but those are the negative headlines that people are going to see and that people are going to pick up because that's what the media picks up. And so it's really important for us as an organization, we focus on the positive. We acknowledge the negative, but we focus on the positive, and we really empower farmers and folks that are in the industry like all of you to focus on the positive. Focus on what do you do on your farm and why do you do it, and tell that story. So other actions, how do these activists get those stories out there? How do they get that big headline? How do they get all the news? Well, the number one thing is they have a lot of money and a lot of time, so much more than all of us have. But if we are a collective group, so there's 50 of us on here, if I was just talking to one person or one community group about my story, it might make an impact. But if all 50 of us have that united front in front of that community group, it makes a lot bigger impact and a lot bigger result and a positive result as a collective front. That's what the activists are doing. So what we need to do, we need to think like them, is we need to do more things like them. They're being successful in social media campaigns. Well, so can we. And so if you think about it, think about who you follow on your social media platforms. There's some really great animal agriculture folks and farms out there to follow that are doing exactly that. They have really positive social media campaigns to tell their story. So as I said, the activists have done a better job. They are communicating with the public. They have a lot of money, but you know what? Money is not necessarily exactly what you need. You have to have a passion. You have to have a story to tell. You have to have a why. You have to be able to talk about why you do what you do. So the activists, I love this quote from Temple Grandin. The activists have done a much better job of communicating with the public. When you get bashed, you need to open a door. not shut it. When you shut the door, they've implied guilt, it means you're wrong. So what we need to do is, if an accident happens, if something terrible is in the headline, that's the exact moment you have to open your barn doors and talk about what you do on your farm. There might be one bad apple out there, but that's not what we do on my farm. What I do is I care for my animals and I do XYZ, and you explain it and you open your barn doors, you're transparent, and you talk about what you do. That's what being an advocate is all about. It's being positive, it's being promoter, it's being a leader. All those things that we had seen in the chat earlier is what being an advocate and focusing on advocacy is all about. So we've talked about the negative. I want to turn now to the positive. There's really good news through all this. The really good news is the majority of Americans, 97%, still love their meat, milk, and eggs. So even though there's those loud voices in the back of our heads saying, gosh, everybody hates agriculture. They might hate agriculture, but they love their food, right? So you have to really switch your mindset to maybe not start talking about agriculture, but talk about food, right? Everybody loves meat, milk, and eggs. The other cool thing is that consumers rank dairy farmers in the top 3 of people they trust. They're trusting their doctors, they're trusting their farmers, they're trusting their family members. So those are the top 3 people in society that we're looking to in order to learn about animal issues and food. So that being said, we know the trust is there. We just have to find those opportunities to tell that story. Find those opportunities to be positive in your community and talk about what you're doing behind your barn doors. So as I said, we talk about consumers. Those are the lovers of food. They love agriculture. They love food. They're us, right? We are those consumers. Those activists are folks we're never going to change. We're never going to change their mind. They are never going to listen to us. They will always have an opinion. Doesn't mean we can't care about them or care about their opinions. We're just never going to change them. So we focus on this movable middle. We focus on this bell curve here, those folks in the middle that just have questions. As you see kind of in her mind, she's just confused. She's reading labels. I want to tell you a funny story that I absolutely love. So I just recently went on an international trip and I was headed overseas 10 days ago and I had to call my credit card company. And I called the credit card company and this woman answered the phone and I recognized the voice. Super weird, right? Big, huge world. I called her and she had actually taken my call last fall, 5-6 months ago, when I was on an other international trip. And she took my information and then she said to me, gosh, why are you taking all these international trips? Well, both of my trips revolved around agriculture. And so I explained to her that I work with farmers and that I'm in the agriculture industry. She was so excited. She said, I have questions. Do you mind if I ask you questions about agriculture, about farming and food? I said, sure. So here I am talking to who knows who at a call center at Visa and answering questions about food labels and GMO products and the different types of milk on the shelf and antibiotics in meat and her questions and concerns. I just wanted to call my credit card company and it turned into a 20-minute conversation because she looked like this lady right here, just confused. She had questions. The conversation lasted about 20 minutes and it ended with her getting my cell phone number. She's texted me since then with questions from the grocery store as she's buying food for her family. You never know when you're going to run into somebody that just has questions. And that's part of developing your story and creating those key moments of how do you tell your story? How do you talk about your path and your journey? So that's just one really random moment of somebody that just had a question. She was in that movable middle. And now I've created this relationship with this woman in Georgia who has questions about food. So how do we reach the movable middle? So forget who it was that I think it was the Pullis family had talked about YouTube channel, right? Creating videos. You're not necessarily always going to have those moments like I did of credit card company making connections, but how do you guys reach those consumers? Is it your county fair? Is it farm days at your farm? So talk to me in the chat now a little bit about how are you reaching that movable middle? What are you guys doing as advocates, in your communities and on your farms? Would love to hear some ideas. I'll have a list here at some point, but would love to add to my list and create some new ideas. So Gavin said the fair, school's a great one, because if you look at your classroom, not everybody grew up on the farm, right? So you be proud of being a farm kid, be proud of being from the farm stand, the county fair, farm store customers. I'll tell you, I have a friend who always walks awkwardly down the dairy aisle. He's a dairy farmer, and he will stand in the dairy aisle and just ask people if they have questions about dairy products. I think it's the most awkward thing, but it's the most effective thing too. Keeping the farm presentable, absolutely. A nice farm is a welcoming farm. Farmers markets, social media, festivals, awesome ideas. So we're going to talk a little bit about, again, how do we be an advocate? The first one is you take ownership. You be proud, as I said, be proud of being a farm kid, be proud of growing up on a farm, be proud of working in agriculture, have that passion and be excited about it. You remember I said that when I was a senior in high school, I wanted nothing to do with agriculture. My mom and dad were in part of agriculture. My older sister was, my younger sister loved it. I wanted nothing to do with that. I wanted to break the mold. It only took me 2 weeks away from the farm to realize that I wanted that passion back, and I wanted to be excited about it. So you're transparent. It's a big word, but it means so much. And it's simple. It's be open, be honest about what you do on your farm. So when you think about it, every single thing you do on your farm, there's a reason, right? There's a reason we take our calves away from our cows. There's a reason we shear our sheep, right? It's not to harm them, but there is an exact reason why. And all we have to do is explain that and talk about that. Speak with passion. Love what you do. Love the fact that you're part of the farm. We're going to talk about investing in goodwill. And that's one of the worksheets that I'll share with Brian to share with everybody is investing in goodwill. It means investing in the good things in your community, investing in good things on your farm, using your resources. It doesn't always have to just be all about you. It can be about, collaborating with other people, finding organizations that can help you, working with cooperative extension on how to answer questions, how to get better, how to improve. Having a strong defense. We know that not everything is picture perfect. Not everything is going to go, hunky-dory every single moment of the day on the farm. We all know that. That's reality. So we also have to have a defense mechanism of if something bad happens, what's your approach? What are you going to do? Are you going to come right out of the gate and then admit defeat? That's probably a good idea is, hey, we were wrong here and here's how we're fixing it. Take a new approach. Sometimes you try your story out and you're like, man, that was a failure. I don't want to talk about that anymore. How do I change my story? How do I change how I talk about that topic? When I first started at this job, I wanted nothing to do with talking about how we take calves and why we take calves away from calves. I didn't know how to explain it. I tried it and practiced it and practiced it. Now I have no problem talking to somebody about why we do that. Listening. I have a great visual later of why we listen. Ask lots of questions. Again, no one in here is an expert. We ask lots of questions in order for us to continue to learn. And then we discuss things. We don't debate them. So a story here is one of the projects we manage as an organization is our dairy cow birthing center at the state fair. At this event, we have 3 calves born every single day during the duration of our state fair, and we open everything up to invite the public in. So when there's a calf being born, we could have up to 800 to 900 people sitting there. You could hear a pin drop as this calf is being born, and we're talking about it step by step. We do have some folks that come in that are negative, and one opportunity actually came to me probably about 3-4 years ago when a woman came in and she was not happy. And I just discussed with her. I let her talk to me about what her issues were, what her concerns were. We discussed things. I'm not debating, not trying to change her mind. but I presented the facts. I presented my passion. I presented what I knew from my farm and from the farmers that I work with. We just discussed things. She walked away, not convinced whatsoever, but I was pretty proud that we just discussed things. We didn't get angry with each other. We accepted each other's opinions and we moved on. And that's really all about what being an advocate is being proud and standing up for what you stand for. So we have to own our actions. So I had mentioned this earlier, is what you do on your farm, there's a reason for every single thing that you do. So this is where I usually, if I'm in a room with people, I usually have everybody stand up. And if you know the 4-H pledge, right, you recite that as a young kid. I have everybody do this. But what I want you to do is, after this, I'm going to send this out as a handout too. I want you to start repeating this, just like you would with the Pledge of Allegiance and the 4-H pledge. Everything we do on our farm is for the health and betterment of these 5 things. It's our animals. So every choice we make is for the health and betterment of our animals, our employees. We have to take care of our people, our environment, our products, and our communities. And if it's not, we have to change it. So again, as I said, everything you do is for the betterment of these 5 things. Everything you do, there's a reason for it. And now it's just time to talk about it and explain it. So how do we do that? We're transparent. We have to talk about our why. And this is so scary sometimes. When you first think about doing this, you might consider, I don't have to tell people why. They don't tell me why they do what they do, right? Doctors don't tell you why they do what they do. Teachers don't give you their lesson plans all the time. Why do I have to do it? The common ground here is the food. The food we eat is what brings us all together, and the food we eat is what binds us together as a society. We have to talk about why we do what we do to produce the food that we are all eating. So how do we do that? We're kind of going back to that list, is being passionate. Find that passion. Get personal. The number one thing you can do is smile. Think about when you're at the county fair, if you are just bumming back on a hay bale on your phone, nobody's going to talk to you. Nobody's going to ask you questions. Nobody's going to think you're credible. Nobody's going to think that you know what you're talking about. Smile. Talk about yourself. This is the hardest thing to do, is talk about yourself. It's not selfish. It's necessary. I love that saying, is talking about yourself is not selfish. It's necessary, because you know your story best. I can't tell your story. There's over 50 people on here. I don't know a single one of your stories until you tell me and you're invested in yourself. So how do you talk about yourself? Talk about your family. Talk about your animals. Talk about milestones, right? Think about those pivotal moments in your life of what made you who you are today. What are those milestones? Mine was, I grew up on a dairy farm. We sold our farm in 1997, wanted nothing to do with agriculture, switched my life around, became part of agriculture, the agriculture industry. And then it's all my experiences across the globe that helped me become a better person to work for the farmers today. Open yourself up to criticism. Have broad shoulders. Open yourself up, because you're going to get compliments. You're going to get compliments for, thank you for being open. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for being the link between the food I eat in the grocery store and the food I pick up to the farm life. Thanks for being that person. And I skipped this one. Be silly. It does not have to be prim and proper and rigid all the time. Be honest, be silly. Find common ground between the person you're talking to and you. It might be the number one common ground is we all eat, but it might be that you're both parents. It might be that you're both in 3rd grade. You find what you have in common, and that helps kind of break the ice. So this is the thing I mentioned earlier, invest in goodwill. I think somebody had commented here, yeah, invest in goodwill. We donated our meat to local food pantries. That is perfect example of investing in goodwill. So Franklin Covey is a man who came up with this this scenario of investing in goodwill and this emotional bank account. So it's not necessarily we're going to put money in the bank, but we think about everything that we do on a daily basis. Think about the things that you do, the good things, the maybe not so good things, but think about your farm. Think about the good things you do. You opened your farm for a farm days. You went to the county fair and you had a booth. You bought ice cream for the little league team after their championship game. You bought pizza for the soccer team. You sponsored a sports team. You gave sweet corn to all of your employees during sweet corn season. The good things that you're doing, because those are what we call the emotional bank account. We're putting deposits in, we're putting those good things into that bank account. Because as we said, not everything is perfect in life, right? So some bad things are going to happen. Think about the time when maybe it's harvest season or it's planting season and it's muddy. You got mud on the road. Those neighbors are going to remember the good things you did. They're not going to remember the mud on the road. They're going to realize that, oh, that was the Smith family that did that. They're really great farmers. They do A, B, C, and D in our community. I'm not worried about that. They're going to clean that up. So you have to do all these good things for that one negative thing that is going to repair that trust. So think about a piggy bank, right? We're always putting money in. We're always putting those coins in. Those are the good things. So when that bad thing happens, it's a long-term strategy. Or when that bad thing happens, there's still good things in that piggy bank. So this is a worksheet that I'm going to send to everybody to think about what are those ideas of goodwill that you can have in your community. These are some of them. Knock on doors, send newsletters, volunteer at the local school, take one of your animals to the 3rd grade classroom, dairy month, beef month, ice cream month, whatever it is, go celebrate it with people in your community. These are some positive social media posts that we've done at NIAC. I want to bring up one more that I did personally. It's probably about a year ago. It was a year ago that there was conversation going around on social media about store-bought ground beef and ground beef that was bought from a farm, direct from a farm. And it looked different. And there was a lot of controversy that there was something wrong with one or the other. And I put on my personal page, I went to the grocery store, 3 grocery stores, and then I had meat from a cow that I had purchased from a farmer in my freezer. I had all 4 of them laid out. I took pictures and I explained why the color difference. My sister is a butcher, so I had information direct from the source. I had information from a farm and I put it out there and it, quote unquote, went viral. Shared over 2,500 times all across the world. But it was me putting myself out there. It was me making myself vulnerable. Was it all 100% feedback? Absolutely not. There were people, farmers included, bashing me, telling me I was wrong, but I was telling my side of the story. I was telling what I knew. I had credible sources that I included in there. I was pretty proud of that. So that was kind of using all those examples I talked about. Use your resources wisely, show your passion, be vulnerable, because I did get a lot of feedback in a positive way from doing that. Utilizing social media. It is our own worst enemy, but it can also be our number one resource in order to meet different types of people and different audiences all year long. So I talked about this before too. We have to take a page out of those activists' playbook. We have to tell stories. Tell those stories. As you've noticed, I've kind of interjected my personal stories into this tonight. I'm not here spouting off statistics and numbers. That cannot always be fun. Do you need that? Sometimes you do. And it also depends on who you're talking to. Some people appreciate those numbers. Some people want the research and the statistics. But more often than not, we have to tell stories. We have to tell the emotional part of what we do and why we do it. My favorite story is that woman on the credit card line that you just made a connection about food and answered questions. And so telling stories, not just statistics. So how do you share your why? So this is another question to kind of think about is, how do you share your why? How do you talk about your story? How do you Explain what you do on your farm. What are some of those ideas that you guys do? You've talked about some of them, YouTube channels, sharing with friends, festivals. The best defense is a strong offense, right? So offense wins championships. I've always said that offense wins games, but we have to also know that we have to have some plays on defense. Not everything's going to be perfect. We have to be defensive every once in a while, but the more positive we are, the more goodwill we do in bank accounts and investing in those bank accounts, emotional bank accounts, the better off that we're going to be. We have to change how we do things. We can't really say research shows this and the fact is this. We have to say is relate to that person you're talking to. It sounds like this topic is really important to you. It sounds like food is really important. It sounds like, you're really confused about that food label. You're really confused at why I do this on my farm. So let me talk to you about that. Let me explain to you why I do this on my farm. Why do we shear sheep? We're not harming them. Why do we milk our goats? We're not harming them. We're doing it for a reason. And so you explain to them. So this advocacy in action, this is a great picture that I utilize because the number one thing that people think this is in consumer world is this is a veal house, right? These are veal calves and they're going to be butchered and slaughtered at 3 days old, and that's just cruel. When in reality, most of us on this call know that these are calf hutches. This is how we raise our newborn calves on dairy farms. And here's why we raise them in individual pens. So it's just going back to that very beginning of what are we up against? We're up against misinformation, right? This is a beautiful picture. It's an amazing farm. I used to work for this farm. People just don't know, right? You can see this view driving down I-90 as you head west on the thruway. This is what people see. Then we have to combat that misinformation. This was another one that farm that I worked with. They had it was during harvest season. They were doing hay in August, and they had one driver that loved his Jake break going through town, and all it did was it just took a conversation. This consumer, written in blue there, or the farmer is the written in blue, and then the person replied with, like, thank you so much. We haven't had an issue. Like, it has not gone unnoticed that you fixed the problem. It just took a conversation because the farmer had no idea that this driver was doing that. And there was no conflict. There was no confrontation. It was just an open and honest, transparent conversation. This was one that an example we had at the birthing center at the state fair. Misconception was these cows are going to end up being sent to slaughter. Nope, they aren't. We care for our animals no matter what age they are. And the coolest thing about this is that we've built our army, right? We've built an army of advocates through projects that we do here at NIAC. You can do the same thing. As soon as you teach someone, help them understand what you do, that person is then going to talk to somebody else and going to talk to somebody else. And it's a ripple effect in this advocacy world. So that's why it's so important to be open and honest about what you do. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. That's where this passion comes in. You have to be passionate and excited about what you do. I've talked about this a few times, finding those shared values. When you find the shared values, those shared values are, for the adults on the group, maybe you're a mom, maybe you're a dad, maybe you both serve on the local planning board. Maybe you're both soccer coaches. For the kids, it's, maybe you both play baseball together. Maybe you both sit together at lunch on the same soccer team. No matter what it is, the one common thing we all have together is that we all eat food. Doesn't matter where it comes from, whether you buy it at the grocery store, whether you get it at the farmer's market. The more times that you find those shared values, the more times people are going to rely on you. They're going to respect you, and they're going to find you as a credible source of information. The more you practice, the better you get. Practice, practice, practice. So one of the sheets I'm going to share with you is how do you develop your story? So you've kind of heard that throughout tonight is how do you create your story and tell your story? You might have no idea where to begin. So what I want you to think about is those pivotal moments in your life. What are the things that have helped you get to where you are today? Whether you're 10 years old or you're 45 years old, there's pivotal moments that have helped you create who you are today and your story. The more you practice talking about that, the better you get. If you talked to me 15 years ago, I was not confident. I didn't know what my story was. I didn't know what my purpose was. And the more I've practiced, the more I've talked about it, the more I talk about myself and what I do and why I do it, the better I've gotten at sharing that with others. This was the example I said about listening. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth in that ratio for a reason. And when it comes to advocacy and being an advocate, we have to remember that ratio. We have to remember we have 2 ears and one mouth. We have to listen more than we talk. When you listen, you learn more about everybody else. You learn more about the person you're talking to so that you can understand how to react. How do you tell your story? And how do you pivot what you want to say based on what they're telling you? Have to listen. And then the power of the question. As I mentioned in my credit card woman example, she just had questions. Some people just have questions and they have no idea where to go because we all live with our phones at our fingertips. These have some answers. They don't have all the answers and they don't have all the right answers, that's for sure. But there's a lot of confusion out there when it comes to the food we eat, the food we grow, the animals that we raise, and what we do in agriculture. So really, it really comes down to the power of the question. This is just some tips on what to talk about and how to talk about it. You know, when we say agriculture, it's a big, powerful word in the industry that we live in. People don't know what that is. So we talk about food, right? We don't always talk about science and technology. Sometimes that sounds scary. We talk about how what we do benefits consumers. The number one thing is we don't just want to educate, right? We talk to doctors and lawyers and teachers, people that are incredibly educated. So we don't want to say that they're not educated. We just want them to understand. We want them to appreciate. And so when you look at like our mission, we don't want to educate people. We want to help people understand and appreciate what we do because these are highly intelligent, highly educated people that we work with. As I mentioned, discussion, not a debate, right? We want to make sure that we find that common ground and have a discussion. We want to be collaborative. We want to be open-minded, respectful to others, putting our beliefs aside and talking about what we do on our farm. We want to be respectful to others. And we might not always have the right answer, and that's okay, as long as you stand up for what you do on your farm. And I think this is kind of coming towards the end here is when you're advocating, it's kind of a summary here is just be confident in what you do. Be confident in your position, be passionate, discuss things, use those personal stories. You don't have to react right away. Take time, sleep on it. It's just like, when folks get emails or get a text or have a conversation, you need to sometimes take time and just sleep on it. It's okay to admit you're wrong. It's okay to admit that something bad happened. It's okay to disengage with a conversation because you don't feel comfortable. But truly listen and again, find that why. Why do you do what you do? It's just like anything. Why are you active in your career? Why are you part of a board of directors? Why do you do those extracurricular activities at school? There's always a why in what we do, especially in agriculture. So with that, I know we've got a little bit of time left for questions. As hopefully you can tell, I love talking about advocacy. I love talking about agriculture. I try to practice what I preach as well, that I'm passionate about not only New York animal agriculture, but I'm passionate about helping others understand and appreciate agriculture. But I'm also really passionate about helping others find their story, figure out their why, and kind of help them go down the path as becoming an advocate as well in their own careers. So Brian, with that, I'll open it up if there's any questions. I will share this PowerPoint. I know it's going to be on the YouTube channel as well on the replay, but I'll also share a bunch of handouts that Brian can share with everybody in the coming days.
Anybody have any questions? So this is your opportunity to talk to Eileen, ask some questions if you have them. She's a wealth of knowledge, and right? I guess one of the questions, Eileen, when we think of this, what have you found as far as social media is probably the most effective, or what do you think where you get the most bang for your buck is?
Yeah, so social media, man, it can be really tough. What my recommendation is it can be really scary too, is to find a platform that you're comfortable with, not necessarily who your consumers might be comfortable with. So for example, as my age, maybe like I love Facebook. I am not a TikToker. I don't feel comfortable with it. Other people a lot younger than me, they do. The Facebook is for the old people, they tell me. And so I find the platform that I'm really comfortable with, that's where I spend the most of my time. So that's where I feel like I make the most impact. Do not overwhelm yourself by trying it all, especially at the beginning. If you're just starting out or you're like, you know what, I want to have a farm page, start with one. Start with what you feel most comfortable with, because it can be incredibly overwhelming to try it all and do it all. The other thing I would say is don't go crazy with content. Keep it simple. Start with photos, start with introductions. Don't go crazy of like, I must go make all videos to put on my platform. Keep it simple. And then you'll evolve and also learn from others. I've learned so much by following other people's social media pages on what I can do as well.
So a lot of these, I would say most of these participants are in school. What's the one
Mhm.
story one thing they could tell their school participants or the class participants to share their story? What's one, one sentence that you think would be really effective to share with their fellow friends?
Figure out the one sentence of why. So if you are, you know, Amy Smith and you live on a sheep farm in central New York, figure out why. Why do you love living on a farm as a kid? And formulate that sentence of, I love being a farm kid because XYZ. I love growing up on a farm because growing up on a farm has taught me XYZ. So it's that one simple sentence, because then, in my opinion, people are going to follow up with, well, what does that mean? What do you mean that you grew up on a sheep farm? What do you do on a sheep farm? And it's going to create some questions. So figure out that one sentence of why you love being a farm kid.
Very good. Anybody have any other questions? So I
I did.
think, go ahead, Chloe. Is it Chloe? Tell us where you're
Yeah.
from, Chloe.
So I'm from Brookfield, New York, and I go to Brookfield Central School. And I have my very own goat farm right outside my door. Um, Last year, I kitted out lots of goats all by myself. It was during February break at our school. So my mom and dad were at work, and I did it all by myself. So I think I learned a lot by doing that. So I just had one question. How did you know that you wanted to be a farmer when you got older? I know that you said that you went to college and you said that you said that you weren't interested in it as a child, but when you went to college you couldn't live without it. How did you find that out?
That is such a great question, Chloe. I found it out because I explored outside of everything that I knew. So I grew up on a dairy farm, and the number one thing I wanted to do was learn outside of my dairy farm. And so that meant for me stepping out of my comfort zone and doing something different. And almost you learn, you might have heard this before, but you learn what you love by figuring out what you don't love, right? And that's exactly what I had to try. I had to try something that I hadn't tried before. And for me, that was going to college outside of everything that going to a college that no one in my family had been to. It was taking another love of my life, which is writing and journalism and sports, and figuring out how to make a career out of that, which did not work whatsoever. So it's figuring out what you don't love to do. And that's really what helped me figure out what I love to do. I would also say you have to step out of your comfort zone. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that was how I figured it out. I figured out, you know what, growing up on a farm wasn't so bad after all. And it was the people. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I love working with farmers. Farmers are the most down-to-earth people. They're amazing people. And I missed that for that period of my life that I was away from the farm.
Thank you. So if you want to stop sharing screen, Eileen, so I can share. So a couple things that we're doing. So one thing, if you aren't on, so one of the things that we do have is New York State 4-H Animal Science Horse and not horse, Dairy and Livestock has its own 4-H page, and we're posting a lot of stuff on there. One thing that I did just post for those kids that are interested in pigs, I'm going to actually try to pull it up. Is I did just share, and I would wait for a couple more weeks, but I will put this in the chat. There's a free day-long pig show conference in Ohio that is free, and if you want to pay to get some of the extra stuff, will be I think it's $17 for kids to participate. It's a full day-long virtual conference in early February. I just shared that in the chat, and it's also on the Facebook page. So with that, I am going to share my screen, and we are going to start a Kahoot.